Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for a very warm welcome, Vishali, Zakia, and Maitri. I am pleased to meet all of you in this version, but yes, this is the new version since COVID, so we've accepted it. Um, Thank you all for being here today and giving me the opportunity to be a part of uh, a struggle against domestic violence and to let me do this through your very impactful platform. The specific legislation that we are here to discuss today is Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Act 2026. So, before we dive into this act, please allow me to give some background of how this came into existence and these sort of circumstances around it. Yes. So, the initial Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Bill was passed in 2009 by National Assembly. It intended to criminalize domestic violence in a way that it aligned with Pakistan's national and international human rights commitments and standards. It was also designed to provide a uniform protection throughout the country. Why this is a notable point that it was intended to provide a uniform protection is that because in 2009, this act failed in the Senate due to much criticism and opposition from political and religious parties, which resulted in multiple varying laws pertaining to domestic violence because once this act lapsed in the Senate, then all provinces introduced their own versions of domestic violence laws. Like Sindh produced a version which is closest to mimicking the bill of 2009, whereas KPK and Punjab introduced their versions that restricted the aggrieved person to be women. And then the law that we are discussing today specifically extends only to Islamabad Capital Territory. So, moving further, as we get into the details of this act, I allow me to share my screen and some slides with you. Okay, okay,
Hmm.
so we can start with the next slide. This is just the title.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned in my introduction, that this only extends to Sambad Capital Territory, and now we can dive into this particular act of 2026 and highlight the key points of it, key elements that make it stand out. Initially, the purpose and scope of the act is larger than the ones that have already existed because it specifically includes other gender and marginalized community by mentioning men, transgender persons, children, vulnerable persons from domestic violence. Um, this is somewhat similar to what the act of sin says, but sin says it says all vulnerable persons, but this specifically mentions men and transgender persons. Children are often included, but to add transgender persons and men in particular um, is gives more clarity as law is in practice and for judges mostly to interpret the law. Next slide, please. So the other key feature of this act is uh, that the definition of domestic violence itself. The act defines domestic violence as acts of physical, psychological, sexual abuse in a domestic relationship that causes fear or physical or psychological harm. Physical abuse is already exists in CPC, which is Criminal Procedure Code, and the Pakistan Penal Code. Most of those provisions do cover physical abuse, which do to a great extent overlap with this act. But psychological verbal abuse is mostly non-existent, especially where it has boiled down to insults, threats, and the act specifically says threats of bringing another wife, remarrying, and economical threat and abuse. These are the things that did not exist earlier. Um, even if we look at penal code or the criminal procedure code. And then the sexual abuse is interesting here because as it says, conduct of a sexual nature that humiliates, degrades, or violates the dignity of the aggrieved person. Now, although the act does not explicitly um, mention marital rape, but as we connect the provisions, it can be interpreted in a way that it does address marital rape. Now, this is something that is completely, we are yet to see how the courts choose to interpret this, what the training around it is. And as the case law develops, we will find out. But the wording of the act itself does give that room to extend it to that because as so when it talks about who the victim can be, it does address women, and of course that's mostly wife in this domestic violence setup. And then as we extend the violence, the definition of violence of sexual abuse, so in that whole capacity, it may be interpreted so. One thing that, in fact, I would love to hear a take of any of you on this, is that it says that the relationship that causes fear or physical or psychological harm. Now, how I understand it is that it has to cause fear or physical or psychological harm. Now, there's a lot of domestic violence that, because of social circumstances, um, other compromised reasons could be age, could be mental capacity in itself. One may not even be able to apprehend fear, yet there is existence of physical or psychological abuse. So this is one thing that I think is up for discussion and to see how it's interpreted. Yeah. Next slide, please. So the one thing that has prominently been highlighted from the people who have discussed, experts who have discussed this law, is the punishment and legal consequences. Although, yes, this act does introduce stringent punishments and consequences, it does not completely introduce something new because a lot of this punishment, as far as physical abuse goes, is introduced in the criminal procedure code and penal code. And these are just the main ones I'm mentioning. There are obviously other acts too, but this is what overlaps all of this. Um, and so, yeah, sorry, I'm just going to go back to this. Where the conduct does not already fall under Pakistan Penal Code and domestic violence, under this act is punishable by 6 months to 3 years, simple imprisonment depending on gravity. So, what is new is that probably for the first time, insults and threats of remarrying or economical problems, abuse, is going to result in proper punishment. The consequences is, as I've shared it on the slide as well, punishable from 6 months to 3 years, and then with the fine imposed from 20,000 rupees to 100,000, where um, the culprit is not able to pay the fine, then their punishment will be extended accordingly. Next slide, please. Sorry, another very important part from the previous slide is that anybody who aids and abets in Thank you, Zakia, for bringing it back. Anybody who aids and abets in this kind of abuse, is in any of these abuses, will suffer the same punishment as the accused themselves. Next slide, please. No, I another one. Yes, the one next to this. Yes, yes. So, what relief can the victim get from the court? So now the laws are not so new in a way that they do exist in one version or the other. Yes, it's good that they're defined. They're probably more defined, or that they come under one particular umbrella. But the the thing that makes this unique and useful is the timeline for it. The timeline around it, the orders that the court may grant, and the protection community around it. The petition has to be filed within 7 days of it coming up, and the whole case has to be decided within 90 days, which is very rare. And it's a very accelerated process given how cases proceed in Pakistan for this particular matter. Yes, all over, true. There's a big log, but for this matter in Pakistan. Next slide, please. Institutional mechanism. So now when we look at the institutional mechanism, again, this is not something that has come up for the first time. An institutional mechanism. It does exist with the Women's Protection Act for in Punjab as well. Um, what we are yet to see is the implementation of these, because there are crisis cells that exist. They offer similar help, medical, psychological, financial protection from the accused. But to see them functioning is something we're yet to see. And again, it's not new, not at all. And in fact, a lot of these things already exist in in circumstances with the CPC and PPC as well. But so I'm sorry. So it helps the aggrieved person understand options, obtain medical treatment, relocate if needed, file. The new thing here is probably somewhat new, is that the court here can order that the aggrieved person may still reside under the same roof and restrict the accused from harming them, or restricting them from entering, or taking away their right to reside under the same roof. Because in a lot of these circumstances, as we socially see, um, on ground level, is that mostly the aggrieved party does not hold any right in property, legally does not have a right in property, which makes it very convenient for an accused to refrain them from using it, or put them out of it altogether. Yes. What are we looking at? Next slide, please. Breach of orders and implementation challenges. Again, implementation remains the biggest challenge. Um, Breach of court orders obviously comes with its own consequences. I've put some there, but they're similar to pretty much breach of many other court orders. Now, the challenge with implementation again remains that in the for the very first place, to start with, is to create awareness. A lot of people, mostly the victims of domestic violence, are not even familiar that there exists a law that can protect them in this way. There exists a whole system that they can reach out to, and that they will be protected or taken care of. So starts with awareness, definitely. and then setting some core examples and to highlight them. Because so far, unfortunately, we have not seen very helpful examples that would encourage others to come up as well. Yeah. Next slide, please. So again, the key takeaway remains that introducing the law alone is not the solution. Awareness, enforcement, and support for aggrieved are pertinent. So I put this little thing in the box that says "Speak up, protect dignity, know the law, support survivors." So I read this somewhere, and without employing any creativity, I just found it relevant and placed it there. Yeah. So this is all from my side in terms of explaining the uh, key features of this law. I'm welcome to any questions.
Okay, I will stop share.
Thank you, Zakia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it seems there are so many similarities with
Mm.
the restraining order laws here. I was just looking at your slides and thinking, yes, this is very similar to what's happening in California, and there's also some aspects are different.